We're used to heroes who end things. They defeat someone, they win the war, they restore balance through strength. Stories usually move toward a moment where the conflict is solved because someone finally imposes their will on it. But when I think about Princess Mononoke, that isn't really the feeling I'm left with. When I think about Ashitaka, I don't picture a hero who wins. I picture someone who refuses to hate. And the more time I spend thinking about his role in the story, the more it feels like he isn't written as a conqueror at all. He's written as a witness.
そのつぶての秘密を調べて何とする。
曇りなき眼で見定め決める
Someone who moves through violence without becoming another source of it. Someone who absorbs hatred without passing it forward. Someone who stands in the middle of forces that cannot fully reconcile and still chooses restraint. And the strange thing is that the film never treats that as a weakness. If anything, it quietly treats it as a strength. The story begins with the curse. The boar god crashes into Ashitaka's village, its body covered in writhing black tendrils. Hatred has taken physical form. It crawls across the creature's skin like something alive. Ashitaka fights it to protect his people. He doesn't even hesitate. Then he rides toward the danger and stops the creature before it destroys the village. But when the fight ends, he isn't victorious. He's marked. The curse spreads across his arm like a living wound. It gives him strength, but it's a contaminated strength. Something violent and unstable. The village elder tells him the truth. The hatred will eventually consume him. So before Ashitaka ever reaches the larger conflict between the forest and Irontown, the film establishes something important. He's already carrying hatred inside his own body. That's the test he enters the story with. And it's interesting how Miyazaki frames this moment. Ashitaka isn't punished because he failed. He's exiled because he acted. He protected his home, and the cost of that action is separation. So he leaves the only place he has ever known, riding into the world with the quiet understanding that he may never return. It's tragic, but it also feels deliberate. From the very beginning, Ashitaka is someone who carries pain quietly. When Ashitaka finally arrives in the lands around Irontown and the forest, the world is already on the brink. Trees fall, guns fire, gods rage, humans build walls and prepare for war. It would be easy for the story to push him toward a side, and in most stories, that's exactly what would happen. But Ashitaka refuses. He helps villagers when they're attacked. He saves San when she's wounded. He intervenes in fights without declaring allegiance. At one point, he says something simple and ends up defining his entire role in the story. He says he wants to see with eyes unclouded by hate. That line has always lingered with me, because it sounds simple, but it's actually a very difficult way to exist. He doesn't pretend the violence around him isn't real. He sees it clearly, and still refuses to let anger decide how he responds. There's a quiet philosophical tradition behind that idea. In Buddhist thought, there's a concept about breaking cycles of suffering by refusing to return harm for harm. The idea is that hatred multiplies when it is mirrored. The only way to interrupt the cycle is to stop passing it forward. Ashitaka feels like someone trying to live inside that idea.
その喉切り裂いて二度と無駄口叩けぬようにしてやる。
生きろ
And then there's the curse that gives Ashitaka incredible strength. When he draws his bow, the force behind it is almost unnatural. There are moments where he could easily become another overwhelming force in the conflict. But something interesting happens. He acts and then he stops. He intervenes when violence erupts. He separates fighters. He carries wounded people out of danger. But he never escalates emotionally. He never turns his anger into ideology. And psychologists sometimes talk about something called a stabilizing presence inside tense systems. In chaotic situations, certain people absorb emotional pressure rather than amplifying it. Their calm slows the escalation around them. Ashitaka almost feels like that kind of presence inside the film. He becomes a kind of container for the violence around him. The hatred doesn't disappear, but it stops spreading through him. One of the things Miyazaki often writes into his characters is the experience of living between worlds. Ashitaka embodies that more than anyone else in Princess Mononoke. He moves between Irontown and the forest, between humans and gods, between industry and nature. He understands both sides, but he doesn't fully belong to either one. This idea shows up in a lot of philosophy and literature. In Greek tragedy, there's often a character who sees the truth of a situation before anyone else does. They understand the forces at work, but cannot force the world to listen. They witness the collision of those forces. Ashitaka carries a similar position. He understands the damage humans are doing to the forest. He also understands that the people in Irontown are not villains. They're trying to survive. They're building lives, and they're protecting one another. That complexity never resolves clearly, and the film never pretends that it will. Eventually, the conflict spirals beyond everyone's control. The forest spirit is killed. The Night Walker spreads across the land like a tide of destruction. At that point, there's no heroic victory waiting at the end of the story. No enemy left to defeat. No single decision that restores the world. Instead, the resolution comes through something quieter. Ashitaka and San return the forest spirit's head. Not to undo the damage, because that's not really possible at this point, but to stop the destruction from spreading further. The land begins to heal in a new way. Not the same forest that existed before. Something different. Something changed. At the end of the film, Ashitaka makes a decision that feels small on the surface but carries a lot of weight. He chooses to stay in Irontown. San chooses to remain in the forest. They care for one another deeply, but they don't merge their worlds. Ashitaka doesn't win San. He doesn't resolve the tension between nature and industry. He accepts that the tension will continue. He decides to live inside that imperfect reality. He isn't chasing a fantasy where everything returns to harmony. He's committed to presence, to helping rebuild something imperfect while still honoring what was lost. When I think about Ashitaka now, I don't really think of him as a hero. I think of him as a witness. A warrior seeks victory. A conqueror seeks resolution. But a witness seeks clarity. A witness absorbs complexity without collapsing into enemies. And that might actually be the harder role. It's easy to channel anger into action and call it purpose. It's much harder to stand inside a conflict without letting hatred shape who you become. Ashitaka leaves his village carrying hatred in his veins. By the end of the story, he's still carrying the curse. But something inside of him has changed. He hasn't eliminated the violence around him. He hasn't solved the conflict. But he refused to let that conflict transform him into something smaller. And maybe that's the quiet strength at the heart of Princess Mononoke. Not conquest, not purity, just the discipline to see clearly, and the choice not to pass the curse on.